Hello and welcome to another session of P5Live Sessions. Thanks for tuning in, synchronized or in the future, asynchronously. Every week doing something different in this environment, P5Live, something around P5JS, improvising, messing around, seeing where it leads us. I'm going to throw a link into the chat, some radio that I'm going to be listening to in the background in my headphones, just to have some audio and not just my voice. But yeah, when I'm not doing a VJ set, I'll just talk so that you can listen to whatever music you want in your ears parallel. So what are we going to get into today? We are going to explore some new, interesting, trippy domain that I've been looking into the last couple of days, week plus, with collaborations out there, doing co-coding and discovering how we could bring Hydra into P5Live. Hydra is this amazing programming language environment for doing video synthesis, modular video synthesis in the browser, and it could always run a P5 sketch inside of it, but in a special way as an instance that I was usually not very good at playing with, and now I'm trying this other way to bring it into P5Live for multiple reasons. One of them being the ability to bring it in as I want to say no stroke, to bring it in as a texture. Let me do orbit control 5 so I can twist this thing around. And to use these amazing textures that it's capable of producing, these images as textures for 3D objects is just one of the ways to play with it. Another big way, let me turn some of this off, turn this back on, is to feed what is happening inside of, I'm going to turn off this blend and maybe go get rid of this stroke and sort of reset. Let's turn a little bit of this off. Basically, there is a hydra sitting, let me turn on orbit control again. Right now, if that works, maybe it doesn't work. Interesting, orbit control, okay, whatever, I'll figure it out. Basically what's happening now is P5 is underneath. Let me do a rotate Y, radians, frame count divided by 4 or something. What's happening here is P5 is taking place and it is being fed as a source into Hydra. And that way we can do all kinds of trippy things, which we're going to explore this evening. So this is like the basic setup. I'm slowly preparing a demo, a few demos to include within an updating version, an update for P5Live, which will be coming soon. And basically it's going to have this little sandbox space, this Hydra, which runs globally. And that way we can make changes here, and I can do a dot modulate OSC. Let's see what happens. Ooh, some trippiness. Just slow some of those numbers down. It'll offer all kinds of interesting play opportunities between these two really interesting environments that one I'm especially familiar in for geometry, for making different things happen, P5, and all of these different possibilities that Hydra enables us to play with. So there will be demos coming soon. We're going to explore some of those things right now. So before I get into too much of this, I'm going to undo a little bit, bring it back to where it was. We don't have a background there because there is no background. We have a clear. We could quickly make a background. There we go. And I'm going to clone this sketch. So I sort of stripped it down to just the minimum that we need for this. And now I'm going to clone, maybe rename it to a P5Live Sessions, and start messing around. Let's see where we go. So we've got some 3D space, and it could be nice to let this thing kind of orbit around. Maybe just have a few shapes going. So I'm going to, the whole world is orbiting, and I'm going to do a translate. Maybe that could just be on this axis. I'm going to make it a bit smaller. I'm going to have a background, and I'm going to translate this thing further off and speed it up a little bit so that this shape is kind of out there doing its orbitingness. And maybe I'm going to have a second sphere and do another translate from there. Hey, welcome Floor, great to see you. Let's have another translation from there and get some rotation on this thing. So we want a little bit more rotate. Rotate X, radians. Maybe it doesn't need to be so slow. Okay, if I turn off background, we can see what this thing is doing, leaving some trace out, and actually it should be smaller because these are like planetary structures that are orbiting each other, and maybe it doesn't need to be such a far orbit, and maybe it should be kind of fast. Maybe every little planet needs to be double the speed of the others so that it's kind of like these, I don't know, like a fish following other fish. So again, right now we're actually looking at P5 underneath a hydra layer. I'll turn off the hydra layer just for a sec so we can see what that looks like. So this is the P5. There is no hydra canvas. It's there, but we can't see it. So let me get one more sphere going in there. I'll kind of copy paste. Should be doing loops, but we're kind of manually changing these values. And we're going to get even smaller, 25. And it doesn't need to be so far away, maybe only 50 away. Or more, like 100. And this one should probably be ×2 to be even faster. There we go. So it's kind of doing this. I think this first one is going too far away from the big. There we go, a little closer. So it's super nice turning off clear and letting these things leave these orbits. And yeah, maybe first I'll add some texture to these things and see what it looks like when these are not sort of the basic fill and stroke structure, but instead giving them an interesting texture from Hydra. So what's happening is like Hydra is drawing here, and this is technically drawing that Hydra layer onto a graphic layer inside of P5. So I can say, let's turn on that texture. Oh, that's interesting. We already have a feedback. That is trippy. I forgot that that would happen. So basically the P5 sketch is being brought into Hydra, which is being brought back as a texture, which I've already experienced does some really trippy things if I even just have a box sitting there. Let me try this. Yeah, so now we're seeing like the feedback of what is being drawn in there. If I start it over, I think we have nothing because we're like feedbacking nothing on itself. So actually once for a little while, there has to be some fill or something taking place. And then I can overlap it with this change. I'm going to try the orbit control again, orbit control, and see if I can, okay, good, that's working, but we're running out of color in a way. So maybe some of those shapes should, if I say fill, or if I say normal, normal material, I forget if it's material or materials. I think it's material. There we go. And maybe I put that above the sphere, actually. Yeah, so now, do I still have a, oh yeah, I don't want this fill. Wrong thing, careful. Okay, let's try this one more time. So now there is normal material on these orbiting things, and the texture of our whole sketch is sitting on this box. So that's pretty wild. I mean, this could be done. I could probably do this with feedback inside of P5 on its own using a get. I don't know if it would have this performance, if it would be so smooth. I think it's a really big ask to do this get function to go and grab basically all the pixels. Okay, so that's a cool feedbacky thing. And that's showing that layer. Instead, I could be saying, let's draw an oscillator. Maybe I need, oops, I should turn off this dot and just start it over from there. There we go. So now that is the texture that's being used. And if I turn off this normal material, then that could be the texture over everything. So this is also how the demos have been set up inside of P5Live. I've yet to play with it for a P5Live session, but there's a bunch of shader examples, and they're all designed for sort of feeding your P5 layer into it. And I still have so much to learn with shaders. I'm kind of afraid to improvise with those on camera, but I should just do it because it's an interesting play between P5 and the shaders. But this makes it so much more approachable to get into what these shaders can do. So I'm going to turn off the box, go back to our planets. I'm going to see what happens if I press clear. Okay, then we just have that texture sitting over these spheres, which I could modulate and say, hey, it should be like 50 or 150, give these really fine stripes. Could say dot rotate, and now we get an interesting spiral happening. And yeah, so this could be used a whole lot to just build these things up and up as just wild textures. Maybe it's interesting to put us inside of one of these things. So I'm going to do one gigantic sphere to be inside of one, and then this is pretty wild, getting the distortion of a sphere with this texture on it. There's no clear or background because we're covering up the image all the time. It's probably interesting to, yeah, potentially could be drawing, I'm not sure if we could have multiple hydra instances in this. That's something to explore later on, and maybe look for an example to have different things happening on each one. If I go dot pixelate, we could see what that's like. Interesting. Yeah, it's really nice in hydras. You have these sort of default values, so you just get to start out with the function and then add to it and say, actually I want a 5x5 pixelation, or I want 15. Maybe there's only one value going in. I have a cheat sheet sitting next to me, or in the background, that I'll probably have to refer to. Interesting. 20, it goes back to these lines, but 19, we get checker pattern. Okay, yeah, so we get disco ball, but then probably interesting to play with, whoops, we already have the dot there. The order of these things, because they're all modular and can click into each other. So first we could pixelate. Ooh, very flashy. And then rotate, or vice versa, or do it twice, rotate once, then pixelate, then rotate again. And we haven't even plugged a value into that. 7. I should try, I forget if I can modulate that rotate, probably with a way smaller number. Maybe not. Bad idea, don't do that. There's other functions to play with that. And something that will be interesting to play with is feeding values from P5.js back into Hydra to get the best of both, and like be using different calculating functions that exist in P5 and bringing them there. So we'll play with that in a minute. But maybe what I start to do is, so this is this like texture mode, grabbing Hydra, putting it as a texture. And what I think I want to play with again is this Hydra over everything, which is interesting. Why is that gigantic? Yeah, right. Because I was just designing something as a texture and grabbing it in. Now if I want to grab the stuff that's from P5, I should turn this off for a second, reactivate a source and this layer. There we go. And now I'm grabbing whatever I'm doing inside of P5 and bringing it here. And I'm going to say no stroke because I don't want stroke on these things. Right now they're like feedback balls. We should probably maybe give them a bit of their own texture. We get some really trippy things happening where it's like, yeah, we see the whole action on the action. And start modulating some of these things. Let me turn on rotate goes nuts. Pixelate is pixelated. There we go. Lo-fi 3D spheres in space. It's there. You can't see it, but I know it's there. So what's it like with, okay, interesting. Play with a couple of these values. So there are two values. It is a with an, I mean, I'm guessing an X and a height. There they are, they're back. Pixelated. Yeah, 160 probably doesn't make much sense. So that's pixelate. But one of the favorite things to play with also in P5 is feedback. I love constantly grabbing pictures, shots of what is happening and playing it back. And whenever I play with like feedback, maybe that'll be interesting, is to do, let me grab a feedback layer. I'll just create a feedback in, let's see, we have to turn off the texture if I start everything over. Great, good to know. Pixelate is a X and a Y for like the, which direction it's pixelating. So this is interesting. If I'm playing with feedback and using Hydra as a texture, I can't start off with it right away because there's nothing fed into it. Ooh, there they are at the right moment to make a really nice image. I have to have some kind of input at that very kickoff. Yeah, but the way I'm usually playing with feedback in P5, I turned off Hydra overlap. I'm going to go to like normal material and quickly grab a P5 feedback just to kind of compare the two. So I can say we use the get function with height and see if it's already, ooh, it's having some effect on me. I can see it's getting laggy. That's frustrating because this is a super intensive function to be asking it to do. It's like go and grab all of those pixels and put them into a new P image. I thought, I'm kind of surprised it's getting, maybe it's because I have all these different things happening that I'm hitting that speed. I'm going to say fb.resize and make the thing small. Otherwise, I'm just going to, we don't need to compare the two. It's freaking out because I don't have feedback yet. There we go. Yeah, it's okay. A little bit laggy. There's different windows open. I'm going to ditch this idea. Only after showing it once. I think I need to see it just to see what's happening. Center image FB00. And I don't see it. Let me go texture FB and make a plane instead. With height. Do I see my feedback? There, I'm getting it. Let me do a create image instead. Okay, doing something wrong, but that's okay. We're gonna run away from this and just play with the feedback to explore what we can do with Hydra. So goodbye feedback. Was gonna play with that, but never mind. Let's reactivate this. So we are constantly capturing what is happening in Hydra. Right now it's this normal material. And then we can start to do some modulate kind of stuff, some scroll or modulate. So I'm going to do like a scroll X which goes crazy fast. That's also going pretty fast, but now we get to see these things like they're running in space. It's kind of like a fight. I could slow that down. And what's super interesting in this environment, doing this kind of stuff in Hydra, is this kind of looping canvas, this kind of endless canvas. That's a really unique aspect compared to feedback that I've done in P5 and in processing, where usually stuff just goes off to the side and it's away until you bring it back. But there are these abilities to kind of like roll the canvas. Super interesting, like a treadmill. Let me try out both of these. Then we have a diagonal. So I can make one double as fast as the other. One bummer is I would want to take a screenshot of this. I tried this the other day while doing some co-coding and was all excited to take snapshots. And unfortunately, this doesn't get captured in the snapshot because this is actually a canvas sitting on top of everything. So I think I might need to set up like a little command key to try and capture some of this stuff. I mean, I'm streaming it so it's captured, but it would be interesting to try and save this. So I'm going to say function key pressed. If key equals, let's do an uppercase S. Then can I just say like c.save? I forget if I can just save a canvas this way. Let's see, I'm going to do a hard recompile just to be sure I'm starting over. Did anything happen? No. Whoops. What I could do is maybe I could save PG, but that's a really low res version of what we're drawing. Let me try that, pg.save. So that downloaded. What did it grab me? It grabbed me a little thumbnail. It's 300 by 300. So that's okay, but not the ideal way. I got to figure out, I mean, I can of course take a screenshot, click, but I'll have to figure out the more ideal way to grab this canvas. If there are suggestions or knowledge on saving a canvas or what the save is in Hydra, would be nice to know. Okay, but let me keep playing with other things that I can do here while I turn up the radio a little bit. So I'm going to try something like dot mask could also be interesting to feed. Okay, this is feeding like a oscillator into it. Or what if I feed the source of itself into it? Whoops, oh. Bad idea. Okay, that's not a thing. Let's go back. Ooh, we've washed out the screen. Let's try this again. Interesting. How did I do that? It's not happy about clear of null. Strange. What did I do? How funny. If I turn off the hydra layer, do we have our spheres? Strange. I'm going to try. Let's see, we're going to try something. Let's turn off scroll and go back to, I'm going to go back to just a plain oscillator. What is going on? How funny. I think I totally killed the browser. Awesome. Let me close this for a sec. How weird. Let me try switching this to a 1. Want, want, want. I wonder if I should update and give this a new name. Let me go like C1, 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 C1. And then C1. Do I have any other references to C on there? C is not defined. I thought that was my only reference to it. C is not defined. Oh no. Ah, there, it was this one. There's another C. No, it's still broken. Something is wrong with clear. What is going on with clear here? Hydra render is not happy about. Let's do a force reload page. Bummer. Okay, let me open up go back to Chrome and let's quit Chrome and reopen Chrome. See if that does it. And now the big question is, am I even still streaming? Because that might have been a bad idea to quit Chrome. Let's hope. Yep, it's still live. Okay, cool. That's still live. Hey, and this is working again. I think we are all good. Funny. Crash and burn for a second there. But good to know we're back. Who knows what happened? I'll have to figure that out before we start making demos for this. I'm gonna clone just to be safe and hide this and go back to our layer. There we go. Okay, we were scrolling. I have a background I should turn off. Yay, we're back. Okay. Let me try some other modulations out. Let's see. I wanted to play with, and I lost my little tabs of cheat sheet. We'll have to quickly go to a cheat sheet. There we go, the hydra functions page. Yep, for anyone else who, maybe other people playing with this already know hydra really well, this is a nice location for these functions to learn about them. And what I'm going to play with now is some of this modulate, repeat and scroll to see what the difference is. So this is like scroll X and scroll Y. And I'm going to try modulate scroll Y. And use it like a OSC in there. Interesting. It's like waterfall of pixels. So that is a scroll Y and a scroll X. I'm going to turn that off for a sec and try a zoom to zoom into this thing. I can also do a modulate scale and feed that in OSC. Whoops, I need a dot in there. And it doesn't have to be an OSC, but that's just kind of a nice first test to throw a number in there. Whoa. The mixture of the two. Maybe it's interesting as well, playing with what is just a scale like versus a modulate scale. Let me say just scale. So this is 0.1, 0.9 would be like just barely in. 0.99 is like just barely going in on itself. This is similar to feedback I've done in P5 and processing, where you just kind of tell the image to be a little bit smaller or a little bit bigger. Or a little bit bigger. And then of course it's nice to rotate that a little bit. Rotate, but not so much. Ooh, but interesting when it's so much. And let me go back to testing, putting this texture on those objects. Ooh, that's pretty wild. Yeah, so now the hydra is both taking in the shapes from P5, producing this feedback image, and sending that onto the shapes. We're getting multiple levels of feedback in there. I'm going to try doing a modulate scale using a Voronoi. Maybe I'm not. Just kidding. Let me go back to, whoops, let's go back to the normal material and see why didn't that work. Oh, I think it did work. Maybe if I typed a little bit too slow. Ooh, there's a tip to do modulating noise. One problem, have to figure out a solution to this. It's really frustrating. Can't use noise in this current setup because noise, we're in global space, and so noise is existing in P5 and it's existing in Hydra, and so they're kind of crashing into each other. And noise is such an interesting function to play with inside of here. I would really like to play with Hydra's noise. Dot modulate Voronoi Voronoi. If I turn off this modulate, what is this one looking like? No scale, no rotate. Ah, okay, so using modulate with like a Voronoi and then putting an amount here. 0.1. Yeah, this is running. Aha, cool, for how much it's modulated by. Interesting, so I'm going to make this like a little bit modulated and make this really big Voronoi objects. 5 maybe. And have this just a little bit of modulate. You can just barely tell a texture is in there. Or can let that number get bigger and bigger. And everything is kind of running off to the side for reasons I don't know. It'd be interesting. Let me try a blend instead. Cool. Then where you can see what those two things are like instead of modulating by it, just blending it from being a lot to just a little bit. To let those things draw over each other. Could use the same and feed it in there. Let me try doing a... Go back to this modulation, have it be a small amount of modular on that. Ooh, that's nice, having just like a little bit of wobble effect. Maybe I change up and try to use the texture again. or let those be color and add like a colorama to this, see what happens. And bring the scale down a bit. So now everything just comes flying at us a little bit while it's doing this light wobble. Yeah, and these spheres really get an interesting kind of specular quality to them from the shading on there. And yeah, maybe I play with a couple other shapes, so we're not just playing with a couple spheres. Let me bring a plane into this as well. Maybe before I rotate. Or bring this... Okay, that's interesting. That's the giant sphere with a giant copy of the texture. I'll hide it now. Let me make a plane that's 500 by 500. Interesting, the plane is not taking on the texture. I wonder why. Ah, there we go. Okay. Wow, so now it's like really feedback. If I turn it off, back on. And if this was a box instead. Super tiny pixels in there. Maybe because it's sitting right in the center of this whole thing. Let me go back to using a plane. And push. Pop. And do a rotate on it. Okay, interesting. And I bet colorama is probably playing a big role in what's happening here as well. I forgot to think about that's effect on there. Let me rotate this thing even more and stretch this thing much wider and make it a bit taller. And temporarily turn off this colorama. I can move this guy down so we could add onto this thing. Nope, everything kind of disappeared. Let me do a, let's check out with, whoops, OSC. Yeah, this is also a really interesting aspect of this whole setup, is being able to modulate the texture and really mess with geometries. This is especially visible if we were to play with, instead of a plane, to play with a box. And maybe on this thing I will say no fill and give it a stroke that's white. And it's hard to tell what's going on because this is so heavily applied. There we go. So there is the rectangle hanging out, or the box rather, hanging out in the middle, and its geometry is being kind of manipulated around. If I do a background, there we go. We can hide the feedback for a minute and see this interesting underwater wobble. And interesting that we can have the oscillator play with its frequency, create interesting kind of ripples in there. Wow, it becomes a squiggle line box. Starts to look like a waveform. Maybe I'll use slightly wider ones, let it be a little bit more modulated. Wow. Yeah, maybe slowly shift into playing around with this box and this modulating this form. I should quickly go look in the same time with the modulate and see just plain old modulate. Are there other parameters I can just keep feeding stuff into there? Okay, wow. Okay, so I'm gonna add something like maybe not. Maybe that's not something to add to it. Ooh, made everything kind of become pixelated. All right. Can rotate this thing. 0.1, 0.2. Yeah, it's also interesting being able to grab variables from P5. So I'm going to try, if I remember this right, it was like, I can grab the frame count, I believe. Yep, so that's crazy, crazy fast number for what this thing is expecting. There we go. So I can slow it down, and now I'm grabbing the frame count from P5. So I could also just invent some other variables, I'm guessing. Maybe I create a variable that that does some kind of other movement. Or can I do a whole bunch of math in here without doing like pure JavaScript style? Can I do a sine wave over this? I think so. Yeah, awesome. So through this syntax can start to use, I think, a bunch of the global functions that are out there where we're playing with the mixture of both. So that's too fast. Okay, but maybe it's more interesting to use this. I didn't necessarily want to rotate this thing. What I'm interested is maybe to feed this number in here for how much it's modulating it. And that's a huge number. So actually I want a fraction of that number. I don't even want up to 1. I want something smaller than that, I guess. And if I modulate it a second time, or modulate this, let's see, this is this OSC. I think what I was trying to do before should have happened, right? It should have happened here, attached to this thing. So let me open this up, and then I could modulate on top of this. Okay, so that's pixelate, not so, maybe not so useful here. Repeat. Interesting, becomes really noisy. Or what if there's just another OSC on there? I don't think I can add another shape there. I think I need to be doing something again like modulate OSC. There we go. Hey, now we're starting to get some of these oscillation patterns. I should probably let this box do some interesting rotation. It's just kind of sitting there because it's stuck. I should do a rotate Y. And I should also, instead of just doing 75, that was for the plane, I should also give this some rotation so we can see this thing moving around a bit. And it might be interesting to play with its stroke weight so we can see it a bit better. And yeah, I have to decide how much these things should manipulate. Let me slow this one down. Maybe I quickly turn these spheres into boxes and disable this normal material to just really play with this. Let me move these features outside of the push pop, so everyone gets them, and no one got them. Everyone said no. What happened? Okay, it's back. Strange. Let's go and just add these features down here. And change this as well to a box that's 50. Actually, I should just be replacing the word sphere with box. That would be a lot cleverer. And make sure I have no fill on. There we go. Yeah, there's Flores mentioning in the comments about using time, which I'm guessing is something similar to frame count. It's just I don't really know. I guess I should find out what the value of time is. I wonder if I can do like I don't know, can I access that variable called time down here? Print time. Ah, there it is. 912. Yeah, so it's definitely a number growing much smaller than frame count, which is this whole value that's just growing and growing and growing and growing. So we've got having a scroll X use this time. Yeah, and right now we're not getting this scrolling effect because I still have this background on, which was nice for kind of calming it down and checking out what the shape was, but I'm going to get rid of the background for a sec. Whoa! I'm going to slow this way down. Bring back the background. Alright, we can't see anything. Maybe I do need to make it scroll a little bit faster. It's more just the fact that the stroke is white and we're just quickly running out of texture in there. So if I just temporarily make the stroke black, then we'll be drawing black over those, and it's nice to modulate this color. So I'm going to say like a frame count modulo 255, so that value just kind of grows and then pops. This is something I was playing with the other day while testing out this workflow. So I got to change it up to also do something else. I'm going to see, why couldn't I make this simply global over everything? Oh, there we go. And then I should be able to turn off this stroke. Okay, so everyone gets it. The bummer being that they're all the same. So actually it's not bad to have some other value. Frame count, maybe times 2, so they're double so fast. Yeah, so we could feed, I mean, it's really interesting that with something like this scroll, there's 2 values. What is the second value doing? What is the difference of these values? I have to change these numbers. So that is 1, and this was a 0.04. I'm going to go back and forth between giving these things fill strokes and a fill color. No, I'll go back to the stroke. Ah, okay, the first value is a position and then time. Okay. Okay, okay. Where it scrolled and then the speed that it scrolls. Okay. Let me calm this down a little bit. So that speed was, whoops, way, way smaller. If I turn off this modulation for a sec, this is secondary modulation. Okay, so there's just the squares without the geometry being modulated. Yeah, so there's a lot going on. I think I'm going to calm it down a little bit by maybe disabling some of these boxes, or maybe turn them into just lines. See what it's like just drawing a bunch of smaller shapes. So I think I just got rid of everything. And we still have something running. This is like that feedback just running by really fast. And I'm going to have just a line hanging out and have it go from 0, 0 to my mouse X, mouse Y. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to have to say minus height divided by 2 and minus width divided by 2 because of the coordinate system. And let me turn this off for a sec. Interesting, we're in a constant feedback. Double check the stroke where I drew this line. We have all kinds of rotations and such happening though, so maybe that won't be so visible. Let me take it away and move it up here. Okay, I'm just going to start it over. Because we still have that texture on. Ah, there we go. That texture was stopping it. Okay, maybe I don't need to do this minus minus. I do. Aha, interesting. That needs a plus and a minus width divided by 2. There we go. Okay, and we still have, right, the scrolling is still on. So no more scrolling. I'm going to go from this and reactivate the stroke changing over time. Maybe have the stroke weight change over time. So it goes from thin to thick. And I could have it just slowly get bigger. Let me do a dot modulate rotate os. Getting we can make some like spinning drip art, I imagine, when it just gets fed into that system. That could be interesting to play with this. Let me temporarily turn off the line for a sec and put some random ink blots in there. But I think I have to go minus width divided by 2. Whoops. I should have finished writing it all at once. All right, so that's working. Just getting a couple droplets in there. I'm going to say random 50 so they can be kind of bigger. And then let them have some random coloring to them. Could be random shades of gray. We could introduce some color into this in a minute. Maybe let the drops be larger so a couple big ones appear in there. Yeah, this was a super fun thing to do as a kid, to have a turntable or a potter's wheel or something spinning and drop things into it. Can let those splotches be even bigger. Could bring color into this. Maybe I say no stroke on this so we don't have this outline. Yeah, I quite like this, any of these higher numbers that give it this kind of wispy quality. And I kind of have nothing to narrate while playing with it because it's so trippy and hypnotic just to see what is happening in there. Let me try a repeat. Interesting. Repeat 5, repeat 2, repeat 1. Okay, maybe repeat is not going to be so nice, but maybe before modulating it. Nope, not so nice. But there is modulate repeat. Let me try that instead. Crazy, crazy, crazy. Okay, nope. No repeat. Let me bring back this slight scroll Y. Rotate on top of the rotate. What happens when you're rotating a rotate? Maybe you can eventually hit some interesting territory. This thing's going to go faster and faster and faster. And eventually it will start to look like it's going backwards. There we go. Some of these. Okay, it looks like 1.9, nope, 9.5, 9.8. Yep, so many interesting things to do in here. It must be fun, frustrating to watch play, and I'm not changing the right thing. But yeah, I encourage, hopefully from the beginning of this video, the setup that is being played with here was visible. And I encourage you to go and play with this combination of the two, this P5 and Hydra, which you could always do inside of Hydra, but this is just introducing a few other ways to play with this thing, especially getting to play with this global space and swap the variables between, which I didn't do that much of. Still have to practice and play with what the possibilities are. So this will surely be a repeated thing. I'll come back to this. Having a lot of fun seeing just what is possible. So many weird things. Wild things. Oh, killed it with the OSC. Blend in of Voronoi. Alright, hope you enjoyed this. thanks for watching. I'll see you next week for another episode of P5 Live Sessions. See you then.